Welcome back, everyone. It's time for session 2. How many insurers is enough? So I'm going to let you into a little secret. Planning for protection review starts just under a year before the event. This year it also changes 2 days before the event. It's a big job. So when we started thinking about today, we were digesting the news that Canada Life had left the individual protection market. It was a blow for advisors whose clients were particularly well suited to Canada Life's products, and we considered the impact that the exit of an insurer would have on the market. As our planning progressed, so came the news that Aegon had been bought by Royal London. Another one bites the dust. What would this mean for the business protection market, where Aegon leave quite a hole? And then, more recently, Aviva announced their intention to buy AIG. Panic stations, everyone, or maybe not. Many of you who were sat here last year may remember Jason Hurley, who's here again today in the audience, talking about premium levels and the lack of margins seen in the UK market. Could this reorganisation be good for the market and get us where we need to be? So we've lost 2 insurers in 12 months with the possibility of another on the horizon. But how many is enough? Instinctively, whenever we're asked how much is enough, the answer is the bigger the better, the more the merrier. Or to quote Oliver Twist, more please. But is that really true? Isn't it possible to suggest that an abundance of choice leads to overwhelm for advisors and for consumers? How can we explain the popularity of comparison sites which whittle down your options and remove some of that choice if more insurers is a good thing? But surely choice is a good thing, no? It means everyone is catered for. There's something for everyone. All bases are covered. But is that about the number of providers in the market? Or is it about the quality of the products available and how they can flex and adapt to meet the needs of the customer? I could cite here recent product launches where there are hundreds of options for customers. So I'm certain that we're going to have a whole range of opinions in the room today. We want to hear everyone's views, both in the panel, Q&A that follows our speakers, but also on social media using the hashtag ProtectionReview23. So it's not just about what we think, though, is it? We've heard so much about consumer duty this year, and it's a necessary reminder that it's not just about what the customer thinks, but what they understand as well. How does the size of the market impact here? And yes, we will get into restricted panels and loaded premiums as part of our discussion, I'm sure. We're often guilty of assuming we know what customers think, what will make sense to them. We didn't want to guess this time, so we carried out some research with Opinion. It was a nationally representative survey, which we did last month. So what did we find out? Starting with customers' expectations, we asked whether customers expect to see options from the whole of the market, regardless of where they're buying from. 18% of our respondents expected to see options from 100% of providers. 31% expected to see options from 75%, and the same proportion expected to see 50% of providers. The average percentage of providers that customers expected to see was 60%. And what did they think the whole of the market was? The average was 40 providers. So if you work that out, it means the average customer is expecting to see options from 24 providers. Did they think this was happening? Again, regardless of channel, only 17% believed they were always presented with every option, and 33% were unsure whether this was happening. We looked at the different ways that people could buy, comparison sites, financial advisors, and banks, to see if customers' view of each differed. We asked about their expectations of where they were buying from being tied to a limited range of insurance brands. They were most likely to believe that financial advisors were tied to certain brands and would only present options from them. 62% of people thought that, compared with 60% for banks and 59% for comparison sites, so not a huge difference there. Conversely, when we asked about the different channels and whether they were truly independent, comparison sites scored highest, with 23% agreeing, 19% believe financial advisors were independent, and that fell to 15% for banks. So if customers felt that however they bought, it was unlikely to be from a truly independent source, is that necessarily a bad thing? 35% of those we asked expected the price to be higher if the search was narrower, and a further 37% didn't know what the effect on price would be if fewer providers were considered. So does the customer feel that they're getting value at this point? Speaking of value, or values rather, here's the big stat of the day. Is it important to customers if the whole of market isn't considered when looking to make a purchase? Well, our findings would suggest that it is to some, but it's not make or break. In fact, there seems to be an acceptance that it won't be the case a lot of the time. However, transparency is another matter. When we asked whether it was important to be explicitly told if the whole of the market is not being considered, we got a resounding response. 88% said yes, it's important that they know that not all providers are being considered, and 49% rated it as very important. Some of you may have read a recent Paul Lewis article in Money Marketing where he suggested that to be a good advisor in the era of consumer duty is to recognise the need to tell your customer if you're not looking at all options. He went as far as to suggest that tied advisors should be telling their customers that they could get better advice elsewhere. So there is a helpful reminder of what customers' expectations of the process might be. We focus there specifically on transparency, and the strength of the response that we saw suggests this is high on the customer's agenda. But it would be remiss of me to stand here in 2023 talking about what's important to customers without mentioning service. After all, you could search hundreds of providers to find your perfect match on paper, but if your experience falls short in the theme of this session, well, it might not feel enough. And here I reference a recent piece by Jeff Prestridge. He praised an initiative by a certain insurer to be more empathetic, only to write a follow-up piece shortly afterwards expressing his disappointment that while intentions were clearly good, service was falling far short. So is this a numbers game? Does the size of the market matter if the service levels are so below par for those in it? It's time to hear from our three expert speakers who are all going to tackle this topic from a slightly different angle to get you thinking. We'll follow that with our panel and your questions, but first let me introduce our first speaker. Paul Yates is Product Strategy Director at iPipeline. Paul has over 30 years' experience in product strategy and business development, leadership roles, and his focus is on driving business strategy and transformational growth, providing a portfolio of innovative technology solutions for advisors and providers to drive down costs in the advice, sales, and servicing process. Please put your hands together for Paul Yates.
Thank you. And good morning, Just. So I've been asked to talk to you about the market, and I think Kevin actually asked me to cover this because I'm old, and he thought I remembered stuff. But being old, clearly I didn't remember a lot. And interestingly, my marketing director actually created the title for this presentation of Honey, I Shrunk the Market. And that's a play on a film from 1989, actually, so it's quite a long time ago. So I don't actually remember everything. I did have to phone a friend, and certainly I tried using ChatGPT to find out some information about who's gone out of the market over the last 30 years and when. That didn't work at all well. So there are certainly some flaws in the use of generative AI. And I apologise if I've missed any of your favourite firms or firms you've worked with in the past, and my timing might be a little bit off, but I'm going to just take you through like a bit of a memory lane of firms and what's happened to them. So first of all, we had a big charge of banks and coming into the market, and those banks created bank insurers. And they sort of came in the 90s, 2000s, and then quite quickly retreated out. There was significant investment from them, and they spent a lot of money coming in, and now there's only a couple left. There's really only HSBC and Lloyds Bank with Scottish Widows still in that space. And what caused that? Well, there's compliance challenges, RDR, and a loss of margin on certain types of products as certain types of more expensive products disappeared. So we actually lost quite a lot of that sort of distribution. And most of those sort of were subsumed up into other organizations. We also found that we lost a massive number of firms, direct sales forces and industrial branch. I have to explain what industrial branch is for some people. Industrial branch was basically door-to-door salesmen. So the man from the Prue or the Pearl, they'd actually knock on doors. But that, again, was a massive distribution channel that suddenly we lost. And there's a couple of smaller ones available left in the UK, but most of those closed, and a lot has ended up in the closed books. People like Phoenix in the UK and Admin Re and firms like that. So we also found that they were also, some of those firms had been those firms that had created quite a lot of innovation in the market. So, one of the, there's 4 of those firms I think I was at in my history. Abbey Life, before I was there though, for instance, introduced the whole of critical illness into the market. But those have all, virtually all of that's just disappeared. And we also, the door-to-door, that whole being able to meet a normal person in a normal home has disappeared because there aren't any people who are going door-to-door anymore. We also found that there was quite a lot of entries from North America, Canada, and the US, Australia, and some from Europe that came in and then soon retreated because it just didn't work in the way they wanted it to work. So what else happened? Well, we also found another bunch of firms, so this is quite a large list now of disappeared brands, that all disappeared as businesses scaled up for success. So some businesses bought other businesses as they scaled up for success, as they needed to improve their ability to make money and margin. And that happened, and a good example of what sort of things happened there. So some of those businesses were just subsumed, other businesses were bought. So, Aviva bought Friends, Aviva bought Friends and actually completely changed some of their product range so that they actually took on the ethos of Friends types of products. Fortunately, they had a platform that could do it, so they actually were able to take on their products. So there are different types of purchases as well. Then what's also happened, though? Well, what also has happened is that we've had some new entrants more recently. And, we've had, in the intermediary market, we've had Vitality came in with Prudential. Then they actually ended up just being Vitality on their own as part of Discovery, a South African company. HSBC moved into the intermediated market. Scottish Widows moved into the intermediated market. And Guardian came in as well. So those companies brought a lot of innovation into our market. And so we have had quite a lot of new companies coming in. And in the D2C space, we've also had a number of other interesting firms coming in, whether it's obviously we've got Beagle Street, who's now part of one family, but you've got iptiQ and Dead Have PR. They're really a life company, possibly not, but they actually do have quite a different proposition to anyone else. So, and at this point, I do want to thank both of my calls out to people to help me on this, Ron and Steve there. And Steve had another 20 life companies that he thought I should add in their brands, but there was no way I wanted to add Blackburn Philanthropic and firms like that. So that's sort of the history. We had a lot of firms disappeared. We've had a couple come back in, or come in, or go into the intermediated markets. So what's the impact of that? And here, I'm just talking about a generalized impacts. So this is Swiss Re data, so thank you again, Swiss Re, for the Term and Health Watch data from a long time ago. And as you can see from that, what really happened was a massive shift in distribution. An incredible seismic shift in our distribution as an organization, where, you've gone from, I think it's something like, well, it says there, we're now at only 9%, I think it is, actually going through the bancassurance and tied route, and massively through intermediated market. So virtually all distribution is through what they're calling IFA here in Term Health Watch, but it means intermediated, multi-channel, multi-provider sort of sales. And that has meant that also, though, but there's a huge drop. This is just for term here. There is some IP data as well. I'll probably pass that through to the IPTF so that they can use that separately. But you can see that there was a massive reduction in the number of policies sold. Massive. So those 500,000, where have they gone? That's just not sold anymore. You know, we've sold to a different segment. We've lost a whole segment of people we used to sell to. So there is actually a huge block of people who aren't getting protection who used to get protection. So I think that's quite important for us to think about. And are we actually reaching the same cohorts of people that we used to reach? Well, clearly not. We haven't got people going door to door, so we clearly aren't doing it. I know it's not cost effective to do so, but we're not necessarily getting to the same level of people. So, all right, okay, so we haven't done that, and actually, it does actually have some also data that shows that case size, APE, has increased per term by about 40% in real terms over that period. But again, that's probably also a factor that the people who have less term, because they aren't as wealthy, aren't in that group. So you would expect that to change. So let's have a think about, well, does that mean that, what else does it mean? You know, what else is there from a product's point of view? So I've just taken this as a representative sample, is that our portal, the iPipeline portal, and said, what sort of numbers of products do we have on the left-hand side, and what number of products do we have on the right-hand side over a shorter period, but of 7 years, but actually looking at that, and you can say, well, the number of providers coming in at the top is logos out, and the bottom is logos out. And looking at that, you're saying, well, the number of providers probably hasn't changed much. It's slightly up, actually, not down, on our intermediary portal. And then you're saying, right, but what about products? And product has actually gone up. That's the right-hand axis, by 80% over 7 years. The number of products we have on the portal has gone up 80%. So again, an interesting, you know, that doesn't sound like an uncompetitive market. It sounds like a market that is competitive and probably incredibly more competitive. So also, let's then move on and then talk about price. So on price, this is term and whole of life. Left-hand side is the average premium. Right-hand side for term. Right-hand side is for whole of life. And the black line with a massive change was whole of life during a COVID period. But this is during a period of COVID and hyperinflation as such, or very high inflation, not hyper. And you can see that actually most of the term products actually priced, this is an average of the cheapest rates, has actually gone down over this period. It's gone down, not gone up, not, you know, COVID and inflation hasn't impacted it. So we're actually saying, well, actually that's happened, and even the whole of life is now cheaper than it was before. So, you know, again, that sounds like a very competitive market to me. Critical illness is slightly different, and critical illness has gone up by about 8%, but you know, you have to remember critical illness products have evolved and improved dramatically over this time, the conditions covered. But still, you know, it's only 8% against an inflation rate that's massively more over that period of time. And finally, I will have a look at IP, and IP is even more dramatic. IP has gone down even more. So again, you know, looking at that, I'm saying, well, that doesn't actually strike me as an uncompetitive market, even though we have lost some players. Yes. I don't know. Has anyone here been to the Design Museum? Yeah. I don't know. There's a wall in the Design Museum. That's the wall, and it just talks about all of the technology that is around and how it's all disappeared, and it's all ending up into that central point of a little device like your phone, yes? So typewriters, people like Olivetti, there's all sorts of record players, Bang & Olufsen. They're all sort of slowly disappearing as things move down to here. Now, I know there's niche people who will still use vinyl and everything else, but it still moves there. That's an enormous amount of evolution. And as a market, we have evolved. But I still believe that, we are still competitive. But I do worry about whether or not we're getting to enough of the UK population. That's my biggest concern, looking at the data I've just gone through. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Paul. So our second speaker today is, well, she sounds incredibly famous and like she might have a husband busy with a certain inquiry, but I'm going to let her enjoy the opportunity for double takes. She's an actuary, one not yet replaced by AI, who spent the majority of her career focused on leading and delivering great customer propositions. She's a breadth of experience across workplace pensions, investment and protection. She now leads the protection business at Royal London and is non-executive director for Royal London Ireland. Please welcome to the stage, Carrie Johnson.
Thanks very much, Jo. Yes, I do sometimes get asked to speak to share the dirt on what's going on in the Tory party. I get random emails asking me to go and speak at events, and I've never had the brass neck to go and do it and see what happens when people realise it's not me. So it's nice to be here to speak as myself. As Jo says, I'm Carrie Johnson from Royal London. And today I'm going to give a little bit about the provider perspective in some of these consolidation, merger, acquisition activity. I've got 4 examples that I've personally been involved in that cover quite a range of scenarios, so I am going to draw on them. I'm quite conscious there's people in the room that have been involved in some of these too, so hopefully I'm not going to say anything that you would disagree with, but we'll see. So the first business, and it's interesting it wasn't up there amongst Paul's slides, which I have to say, Paul, you made me feel really old because I think I remember almost all of those companies. But Standard Life back in the day actually was one of the top 5 protection players. At the peak, we were writing over 40 million APE. So that was probably at the kind of early noughties. And what happened during demutualisation, which was about 2006, there was a sort of new strategy set out. I came back from maternity leave and somehow found myself in charge of protection pricing at one point and was working closely with Mick James on proposition to see what we did with the protection business. And initially we were given a ridiculous target. I suspect it would be breaking confidentiality to share it, but it's still ingrained in my brain because it was just so crazy, the APE that we were supposed to write. But what actually happened was that the SIP business really, really took off at Standard Life at that time. And essentially we did a strategy review and concluded that protection wasn't going to be core for the business. So we were then asked to see if we could still meet the target, but with 0 investment. Now, at this point in the market, technology was starting to play in. So we had online applications, but it was an emerging trend, really. So we still had most of the business coming in on paper. And at Standard Life, we were definitely behind where we needed to be. So to actually start and try and participate effectively in that market with no investment just didn't feel possible. I do remember one reinsurer who was mentioned earlier, Jason Hurley, see him over there. So this may or may not be true, but I do remember Jason telling me that if we looked at the forecasts that all the providers had put in and added them up, the market was going to grow by 400% that year. So for avoidance of doubt, that didn't happen. But I think it suggested the buoyancy that was in the market. People were optimistic. We all thought that technology was going to save the day. We all thought technology would make the process so slick and efficient that we'd free up advisors' time and they would go out and write tons more protection business in the world would be fantastic. But you did need to invest in the technology. As I say, Standard Life got to the point where the protection business wasn't core and we weren't going to make that investment. Now, I personally found that very difficult because I thought we could do it if we wanted to. If we wanted to commit, we could have made it a success, but we just didn't have the appetite as part of the overall strategy. So we then had to decide what to do with the business. At the time, it was profitable, not massive profits, but it was profitable. And I personally wanted to close it fairly quickly because I think dabbling in that kind of market when you're not fully committed is just not the right thing to do, unlikely to lead to the best customer outcomes. And personally, it was just very hard to work in a business that you know is just in decline, probably moving towards an inevitable closure. But it was still a tough decision. It affected customers, colleagues. In the short term, we took a financial hit because we were making profit, costs had to go elsewhere. But I still think in hindsight, it was the right thing for that business at that time. They may change over time, but at that point, it wasn't core and it wasn't the right strategic fit for them. So I think just because we didn't have that alignment, it was absolutely right to close it and basically don't dabble in it. So move forward several more years. So I joined Scottish Provident and Bright Grey, I guess it was at the time. So when I joined the business, Royal London had multiple brands. So we also had Scottish Life, Ascentric, Caledonian Life. But within the protection business, we had these two big brands, Bright Grey and Scott Prov. Scott Prov was a well-established, traditional, well-regarded brand, tending to operate in higher socio-demographic groups. Bright Grey was this sort of challenger, up-and-coming, more modern, vibrant, mass-market player. Had quite different distribution footprints as well. Within the business, they were run sort of separately, but some parts joined up. So separate marketing teams, different servicing, one insourced, one outsourced. Different systems, everything was sort of slightly different. And what really happened was we used to talk about having clear blue water between the propositions. And over time, that clear blue water started disappearing. And part of that was as we were developing them, if we had a good idea or we wanted to change CI definitions or something like that, it seemed odd to do it in one and not the other. You know, why would you offer a good idea to one set of customers but not the other group? And more, I think we got to the point where we were making decisions based on what was possible rather than what was right. So it was kind of whichever system was easier to update quickly sometimes got the sort of new enhancement. So we reduced that kind of clear blue water. I'm seeing Susan smiling, so I'm hoping she does remember that. We reduced the clear blue water and we hit this turning point where we knew we needed to do some more investment into the proposition, but it didn't feel like it was sustainable to keep both brands going. Now, the other thing that was happening, I mentioned before with Standard Life, it had kind of come out of kilter with strategic alignment. The thing that was quite different at Royal London was at that point we had decided we were going to rebrand to Royal London and bring all the brands under that umbrella. Not all at once, it wasn't going to be a big bang, it was going to be when they were ready. So we had this sort of trajectory as a business that we were moving to that single brand and we were going to start investing in it. And it made a lot more sense for us to take the two brands that we had, consolidate, and move to the new brand as part of that. So we did quite a lot of work. We used to talk about doing best of both. We tried to bring some of the things that people loved about Scottish Provident into the Bright Grey product before we painted it purple and rebranded it, and tried to take the business with us. Now, we expected to have a dip in market share. We didn't think we would manage to maintain the combined market share as we went through that process. So we thought we'd get a dip until we started getting the benefits of the investment back. But actually, I think what happened was we had this sort of commitment and a renewed energy when we joined everything up and created this single proposition and single brand that we went behind. We also had Debbie Kennedy join us at the time, and I think she gave us another energy boost to take things forward. So it actually ended up being, I think that the combination of the commitment and that energy and real focus on making a single proposition and brand a success really did pay off. So I think that one, it just felt like we had a much stronger opportunity if we brought things together under one. But there's a lot of people who were quite emotionally attached to the old ones, and that's always quite hard to lose and make sure that we don't bin them. As I say, we were trying to take what we liked about each brand forward and take that within Royal London. My next example is slightly different. Joe mentioned that I'm on the board in Ireland now. But at the time when Brexit came along, we had to make a decision about what we were going to do with the Irish business. It was quite small. You could argue either that it was a good near-term opportunity for us or it was a distraction. And we needed to decide, did we really want to invest in this business and create something better from it? Or do we close it down because under Brexit we couldn't have it running as a subsidiary? So at that point, I was actually in finance, supporting some of the teams and doing a strategy piece on it. And the primary driver really was the commercials, really trying to look at what do the numbers look like if you actually put in the extra costs of running as a separate subsidiary rather than a branch office. And that's including putting the board in, putting all the extra governance in that goes around it. And it was, several million a year that costs, plus the investment of actually setting up in the first place. So this is a small business, only writing protection. But actually what we found when we did that was, first of all, the margins are a hell of a lot healthier in Ireland than they are in the UK. So it was quite an attractive business. It felt like there was real scope for growth in the market. And it also felt like there was real scope for us to win share in the market just by doing some of the basics right. And I know it sounds easy. So if you just get a brilliant proposition, fantastic distribution and brilliant servicing, you're fine. So that was really, we just recognised that there was a real opportunity there. And then on top of that, we felt that there was a growing opportunity in the pension space. So the initial focus was around protection and could we make the protection business viable if you load in all these extra costs associated with setting it up. And the answer there really was that because of that kind of the positive profit profile in the protection business already and the opportunity for growth, we felt that actually this was a really good investment. And again, there was something about when we made that commitment and we applied to the CBI for authorisation, that gave the team and the market a massive confidence boost. So I think at that point, people were probably wondering whether Royal London would stay there. We were still called Caledonian Life at that point. Whether we would stay there or whether they would come out, the same as they were thinking that with any kind of UK-based company at that point. But when we made that commitment, it really made a massive difference and that business really, really took off. My last example, which is probably the most recent one, is Aegon. So I was obviously involved in the Aegon deal earlier in the year. And I think this is a sort of very different scenario again. So Aegon were the market leader in that high net worth and business protection space, very, very well regarded in that area. They had tried to expand into the mass market and had taken on business that I guess was a mixture of different quality and essentially hit a problem with financial, sort of ongoing financial sustainability for the new business and decided to close it. Now that gave all of us, or several of us in the market, the opportunity to buy it. There was quite a few people looking at it as a business. From Royal London's perspective, we were looking at it from the point of view of, first of all, financially, did it help us in some way, and did it give us additional scale? And secondly, from a customer point of view. So we did an analysis of their customers and our targets and made sure it was actually a really good fit for what we wanted. But fundamentally, I think the scale point was really, really important. It really does help if you've got scale in the market now. And from the Aegon customer's perspective, I think if they are going to close the new business, it's better that they got bought over by a protection provider that's going to give them that continued focus and protection and have the capability to support them. So it did feel like it was a good balance of marrying financial and customer benefits. But the one thing I would say is, it did leave a bit of a gap. That market leader for high net worth and business protection left the market. And that's left space for several providers, a lot of us, to come in and try and win share in that space. And it's arguable whether that's going to have a long-term improvement in competitiveness or not. I actually think it probably will, because there's actually quite a few providers now trying to improve high net worth propositions instead of having an out-and-out market leader. And maybe that's better for competition. So the things that I would say when we look at all of these opportunities, I think strategic fit is absolutely critical. If it's not core, it's never going to get the attention it needs. So I think that's really, really important. The customer and financial is always going to be a bit of a balance, and I think financial is always going to be the lead driver. We are companies, even as a mutual, we're still here to make money at the end of the day, so that's always going to be a principal driver. And the sustainability of those financials is really, really important. And Catherine will pick up in a minute, but Paul's alluded to it as well. What you've seen with the sort of price reductions and the investment required now to support technology, the demand on providers means that you do need some scale and some, you have to have effectively an attractive enough return to put that investment in. So I think we do need a little bit of a rebalance to make sure that we can actually provide that value and keep investing in focusing on better customer outcomes. So I'm going to hand over to Catherine now to continue that theme.
With thanks to Carrie Johnson there, and not just for not actually being Mrs. Boris Johnson. So our final speaker today is Catherine Thirlaway. She's an Associate Director at Alpha with over 17 years consulting and industry experience, specialising in strategy and M&A. Catherine has led market and product strategy, launch and review engagements, and advised a number of clients on organic and inorganic opportunities to grow and expand their businesses. She previously spent 10 years at Standard Life Aberdeen, where her experience includes in-house corporate acquisitions, disposals and integrations, as well as wealth proposition design and build. A round of applause, if you please.
Got little legs and can't walk quick enough to get to the stage. Good afternoon, everybody. I think we've tipped into afternoon at this stage. Just bring my slide up and definitely skip that one. Maybe slightly different from other consultancies. I've actually just elected to go with one slide today and lead with a picture. And as Joe kindly introduced, my background actually has been in M&A. So when we broached the question for this session, how many is enough, Carrie, Paul and I automatically started talking about some of our shared history. And certainly Carrie and I were thinking about all of the shared names we'd come across at Standard Life. But when answering this question, I think from a protection market point of view, I try to take a step back and think about it a little bit more academically, and then certainly trying to think about what the impact consumer duty was having on this as a question and the industry more generally. So it kind of brought me to this kind of tug of war imagery, with fewer insurers on one team and more insurers on the other, and kind of got me thinking that too far in either direction could be disastrous for the players, almost all of the consumers in the UK, and probably have a profound effect more generally in the market globally. But then I thought, well, it's okay because there's balancing forces on each side. Backing the case for the fewer, larger firms, we have risk pooling. It's the core concept of insurance, with the law of large numbers meaning bigger really is better. Providers having that data, more of that data that can help refine products and services they're offering and really kick on with that innovation. The fewer, larger providers could have that operational scale that should mean they could and should be enabling better outcomes for consumers. Larger providers, as Carrie was mentioning, can invest in technology, and that is important, that idea of investment for the evolution. They could support process improvement and standardization and, bring down costs for consumers while maintaining or improving services, at least in theory. From a regulatory supervision perspective and compliance and oversight, it's far easier to keep an eye on fewer rather than many participants, apologies. On the other side, team more, there's a couple of instances, the cases that transcend industries. We all appreciate the need for consumer choice and competition. Different consumer needs can be met by different solutions. A one-size-fits-all product strategy is not a recipe for success. And competition, naturally, is the driver of innovation and price police. Maintaining and ensuring competition in the marketplace is core to a functioning free market. More participants also brings business model diversification benefits. It ensures resilience in the market, diversity, enabling the industry to experiment with new things without necessarily having to bet the whole house. So far, so obvious, but that's not the whole story. In the middle, we have the chasm. We've got the different forces, the different things that kind of keep this tug of war at play. And the forces of more versus fewer, they're constant in name only. They're ebbs and flows, and they are at the center of the currents and the trends that shape the market. And two I really want to pick up on more recently have been technology and regulation. From a technology perspective, the benefits bestowed on larger insurers are that they have the ability to invest in the latest technology, enable them to compete more effectively, and potentially bring that tech advantage to sub-scale competitors through acquisitions. But I can't see him, but I think Iain was making a very interesting point earlier, that technology isn't always the answer. Certainly from some of the work that we found and with advisors, more technology does not necessarily enable more efficient processes. Advisors are operating in a very complex ecosystem where more systems, more technologies, more easy ways to do things does not necessarily mean that they can write more business. And Carrie, I think you picked on that up on that point when you were speaking as well. I think the other thing for this industry that's really pertinent as well is with technology and technology solutions, data sits at the heart of this. We've seen kind of different data strategies and evolve in the last couple of years as big insurers have lots of data, but don't necessarily always know how or what to do with that data. Having lots of data points doesn't necessarily mean you can always evolve in the most efficient and pragmatic ways. And of course then, at the centre as well is regulation. Today we have an increasing regulatory burden that is driving consolidation. Subscale operations require a similar level of regulatory and compliance oversight as the larger peers. Consumer duty has also shifted the focus and the dynamic of regulatory supervision. The cross-cutting rules on avoiding foreseeable harm and acting in good faith for customers are particularly pertinent in this market, and I'd like to explore that a little bit further now. As Paul has shown from his data, these products are still predominantly sold rather than bought, and advisors do have a challenge with their clients to get them to understand the complexity and the value of these products. I'm sure most of you will have seen yesterday that the Exeter released research highlighting UK consumer assumptions about protection, and coupled with what Joe showed us earlier as well. With the Exeter example, nearly half, 44% of the people researched, overestimated the cost of income protection, life cover, and cash policies. When this was then compounded with 40% of the respondents saying affordability is a key factor for considering the purchase of insurance products, the industry, regardless of the number of participants, still has a significant job to do to help customers understand the value of protection. One of the things that we've been exploring is how can providers help and equip advisors, and again, Iain mentioned this, wealth advisors, mortgage advisors, to help to have these conversations with their clients. And this aligns directly to the consumer understanding and consumer support outcomes within the duty. Are there opportunities to streamline quote and application processes to mitigate fallout? Or more controversially, is there a potential to build greater guidance capability within some of the providers to facilitate wider access and understanding directly? Continued innovation, though, will naturally come at a cost, and I don't think a race to the bottom pricing strategy is going to enable this. We've also got to think about how providers are going to continue to evolve their products with continued advances in medicine and changes in society. I think only yesterday, Royal London were announcing some of the changes to the definitions of critical illness. Carrie, and you and I were having a conversation down on the plane today just on how much that product itself has changed and how many terminal illnesses now have gone from terminal to just life-altering, but do customers understand some of these different definitions, and how can providers and advisors support customers to understand this? An additional part with the duty, of course, as well, and a really important aspect is vulnerability. How are providers and advisors thinking about how vulnerable customers are? And I don't think it's just that traditional definition of vulnerability anymore. How are you, through your data, looking at picking up, whether it be lapses through client contact or even advisor contact, where maybe certain client vulnerabilities aren't necessarily being taken into account? And I think understanding in this particular aspect, and when we're talking about the duty, is very pertinent, particularly with the numbers I mentioned from Exeter and the numbers Joe showed. I think, Joe, some of your research, I think there was large grey boxes for don't understand or don't know. that presents a massive opportunity, but currently is a very significant risk, I think, in the industry at the minute. I think additionally with the duty as well, the value of good customer outcomes have important repercussions for how for providers and advisors service and innovate for customers. As Carrie was saying, cheap does not always equal value, and choice does not always lead to the right customer outcomes. How will providers monitor and assess the intended use and design of the products and evidence that they are being sold and understood correctly? How will you change if you need to change your products and services in line with the duty? Insurers and advisors must work together to improve protection outcomes and journeys for their clients and customers. I think one of the really pertinent and hot topics with consumer duty at the minute is the evolution of charging models, ad valorem, fixed fee. But for this particular conversation, what will happen with loaded premiums? Joe, you showed earlier as well that this idea of tied advisors, restricted versus whole of market, how we will see that evolve. I think one of the key aspects for consideration here is disclosure to customers. If our customers don't already understand the products they've got, layering lots more information and disclosing what you looked at and what you didn't doesn't necessarily seem to suggest that we will lead to better customer outcomes or enable further understanding. A different approach might need to be taken. I guess the consumer duty has the ability and is causing a significant amount of disruption for advisors and providers. And whilst it's daunting, it does provide opportunities to expand customers' understanding, our understanding of customers, and how the use of protection and other products in the market can benefit the UK population. I think that was the point that Iain was making earlier too. So the factors and the forces that I've mentioned do have a material impact on the sector and the number of insurance. I think from 2017 to 2022, there has been a significant drop. We've dropped from 556 to 402. I don't think there was that many logos on your presentation, Iain, and I think there's some sub ones there, but I think I am including the Blackburn company you mentioned. But how much further will this trend go? And will it be better or worse for consumers? I guess the answer is anyone's guess, and there's more educated people in this room than anywhere else, so we'll be curious to hear some of the questions we get after this session. But the right answer is most definitely more than one and less than 1,000, and certainly not 402 in our opinion. Our regulator will be scrutinising ever more closely how the data and insight that providers have on their customers is being used and how this aligns to the best interests of customers. Ultimately, the number of insurers will be secondary to the participants being able to demonstrate that they are able to and do provide access to the right products with the right service for customers at an appropriate price. Quality should ultimately trump quantity. But I guess as we ask these questions as an industry, we've got to be wary of that echo chamber that Iain mentioned. It's all very well, we can talk about why there has been consolidation, what the business motivations and what the drivers are, but we're still sitting with some very powerful customer data that says there's a large part of the UK population don't understand what these products are and what they can do for them. So I think rather than it being a quality or a numbers game, I think there's some more fundamental questions about how we're going to address some of these questions for the UK population and what that will mean as providers evolve their products and their service offerings to capture the opportunity, and that's ever more acute and is going to be in the spotlight with our regulator as they implement consumer duty. Thank you very much.
Thank you to Catherine, and thank you to all of our speakers today. I hope they've got the cogs turning for you. It's panel time now, and I'm going to welcome my panellists to stage as I introduce them. Wesley McCranor is a recognised business leader in the protection industry, renowned for his unwavering commitment to clear and precise medical underwriting outcomes for his clients. Simoney Kyriakou is an award-winning financial journalist and author and has been writing on personal finance since the late 1990s. Iain Clark has worked in the financial services sector for over 35 years. Iain now spends time consulting and enjoying time with his family. Finally, Robyn Allen is Partnership Development Manager at the Openwork Partnership and a former financial advisor. So, Simoney, we'll start with you, if we may. I wondered if you could give us an overview of the trends that FTAdviser has noticed over the past few years in terms of consolidation in the market.
Sure, and like a good Gen Xer, I'm actually using technology to help me remember these figures. So in 1993, Financial Advisor, as was, now FTAdviser, we had 118 companies entered into our database in the pensions and protection category for the Financial Advisor Service Awards. We now have 31, so these would be sort of the pure sort of protection. And sort of names like Eagle Star, Allied Dunbar, there certainly was trouble ahead for those of you who remember the adverts in the 90s. But there's so much going on that it's quite difficult to sort of keep on top of it from a technology point of view, from an awards point of view, from just actually trying to tell my staff who to speak to at which company, because you go off on maternity and then a whole host of companies go under, and I don't know whether it's because they don't want to give me protection, postpartum, but that's something. But many of us can remember the heyday, sort of in the early noughties. I think, and the great Scots Life parties that used to be on a Thursday night at First Thursday, or some of us might also remember Scots Life sending homing pigeons and boxes to journalists. That was fun. That no longer exists. If you want to hear more about that story, it's a true story, and the RSPCA got involved. I can talk to you later. It's a true story. We journalists had to deal with all this, but fortunately, the insurers now are much more responsible, and they take ESG very seriously. But it has posed a question, a pragmatic question for us. How do we go about providing the background on stories when so many providers sort of disappear and spokespeople have got different job titles, but they haven't actually moved company. The company has moved around them. It's quite interesting.
Yeah. Iain, can I come to you next? I'm interested in your views on what ultimately makes life business profitable, picking up on some of the themes from Carrie and Catherine.
Okay, it's difficult. It's difficult, it's complex. All of the slides that you've seen before highlight the issues that you have when you're running a life business. A few people here probably are aware of those issues. Is it a strategic fit for your business? Strategically, does it work for you as a business? I don't think I'm telling any secrets here. Life assurance does not make a life company a lot of money. A lot of it comes from the peripherals that come around the business itself. And your job as a CEO and MD is to try and balance those things in a way in which you make some money. And a lot of that revolves around, in a bigger company like Legal & General or LV, is around your relationships that you have with two key components. The first one is the reinsurer. Because regardless of what you think you know, the majority of the businesses that you deal with on a daily basis are, I would say probably, and again, hopefully I'm not talking out of key here, 95% of their business will be reinsured by reinsurers. So they're taking the risk. You've got to try and keep them in equilibrium, and it's a really difficult job to do. And that's part of having a good underwriting team. It's about having great distribution. It's about having a fantastic CFO who knows how things work properly in the market. But it's also about having great teamwork and team ethics within your business itself. Fight for the right business, not for the wrong business. And we've seen in distribution, there's quite a few businesses that have gone out of business. It'd be interesting actually to have, maybe Paul, you could do some of those bigger companies that were writing a lot of business that have gone out of business, that the insurers stroke reinsurers are indebted to at the moment as well, because the quality of the business wasn't good enough. So it's about the balance, and it's coin a term, bloody difficult.
Robyn, let's come to you. So where are we as an industry in terms of independence and restricted panels, and where are we going?
I absolutely understand the place for both, but when it comes to restricted, internally we have a fantastic propositions team. They are there to make sure that we have a protection panel that can meet Obviously, essentially not all, because I think even a fully independent person probably can't meet all needs because there is still restrictions in the marketplace as a whole. But they are there to make sure that our advisors have everything they need to give great service to the clients they're dealing with. Because just as Simoney's has problems keeping up with contacts, we've got BDMs that our advisors need to stay in touch with because they need to build those relationships. They need to keep on top of the products. And to Paul's lovely chart, in terms of the number of insurers, not really changing a great deal, but the amount of products keeping up, probably every week we're sending out some kind of communications going, there's been a change, there's something new, you've got to update your knowledge. And that's just for the protection side. That's not including the mortgage side and the wealth side. So I feel that by having a restricted panel, what we do is enable some of those advisors to breathe and have a second and know exactly what they need to know and have that focus, which I think personally helps those clients to get that strong advice, because our advisors know those products and those insurers really well, rather than going out into a full marketplace potentially and not always having the knowledge they need to really strongly recommend a product.
Wesley, can I ask you what advisors can do to ensure that they're obtaining the best terms for their clients, given the evolving landscape for providers that Robyn's just mentioned?
I think it comes back to my lens on the market and my kind of knee-jerk response to the question of how many insurers is enough. You know, there's some great products, there's some platforms out here, all the technology we've got that teaches everybody in the industry about the product. There's not as much focus on the medical underwriting aspect. Advisors, to earn your fee, if you like, you know, put your best foot forward and understand what's going to happen, who's got the philosophy, who's going to look at that case. They need to understand a little bit more about the background, the philosophy, who the reinsurer is if they're above treaty limits. Now, I know that's not always public knowledge, but you can kind of find these things out because at the end of the day, you know, we're kind of looking at this. So I think advisors can educate themselves a little bit better on what they're going to go through in underwriting.
Thank you. So at this point, I'm just going to pause and ask if anyone in the audience, Emma, I can see your hand went up first, and I will get to everyone else afterwards. Emma Thompson.
So given what Paul was talking about earlier in terms of the pricing going down for all these products, are they just not too cheap now? We're not actually seeing increased numbers of consumers buying them as the prices have got cheaper. What it's meant is that insurers have got less profit to actually invest in the things that we need to be able to deliver the services that customers need from us, whether that be claims or processing or whatever. So I just wondered what the panel's thoughts were on that.
You can get figures saying that price has overall gone down. That's just an average. What's pulling down the average? Is it just really cheap, off-market, quick as a fix life insurance products for a 20-year-old or something? Because if you look at more complicated cases, so many advisors have people who have complicated medical histories or certain conditions, and suddenly the amount of providers that will cover that person become constricted in number, and the premiums go up. So we've got to be wary of just saying, well, prices on average have come down, because actually for the sort of people that would tend to go to a financial advisor for help with their conditions, and the sort of advisors who then come to us say that providers have been annoying them, can we please write a story? And usually if we write a story, then the provider says, oh, suddenly we've been able to fix this. So I can understand why advisors come to us, so we're always happy to have your stories. You actually find that it's more expensive for those people. The number of providers available to cover them or to give them that income protection is fewer. And it is more costly. So I think we have to be a bit careful about, you know, just kind of talking about volume and price.
I think some of it leads back to what Steph was saying earlier in terms of fast followers and everyone just kind of jumping on a bandwagon and joining in. And ironically, when we're talking to advisors, we're saying, please don't focus on price. Please focus on quality of the product. Please look to the overall package. Yet we're sat here talking about price, so it kind of feels like we're a bit skewed at times. But it is that focus on that end consumer, focus on the advice given, and focus on pairing them with the policy that does what they need it to do. The consumers will remember what a direct debit is for, because a great advisor will have made sure they understand that this direct debit makes sure that in the event of X, you have Y. but they forget everything that's in the periphery. So it's not just us as an industry, I think, that needs to sort of look off centre. It's encouraging everybody to make sure that the wider picture is always considered whenever a decision is being made or something is being thought about.
So am I hearing, obviously this is actually more of a question for you, Iain, and I think answer Emma's question as well, is obviously coming from a broking side, not an insurer side, is this kind of arms race between insurers with added benefits and so forth costing the insurers too much of their margin? Is that?
It depends if it gets used or not.
Sure.
So the least you say about it after you positioned it, it doesn't cost a lot because not a lot of people use it. And, you know, sometimes you remind people, sometimes they don't take any notice because it just goes in that drawer or it gets thrown in the bin or it just doesn't happen. And the key thing here is having the conversation, talking to the customer. Did you know you had Square Health? Did you know you had this medical emergency cover? Did you know you had this? And everyone's going to forget because you remembered when you were buying that home that you want to live in with your family and your kids, and you wanted to protect yourself in case you had a critical illness or your income went away. But you forgot around all the peripheral things that potentially could help you moving forward. Why? Because we don't communicate with you. And the key thing here is communication. And I think that's probably one of the reasons. Because we haven't got products that can adapt to people, we've got products that are there for people. And the people have got to come and ask for it.
Hi, Ricky Brownlee from Health and Protection. Looking at the consolidation in the industry, do you think that this has been good or bad for the consumer? And do you see more of that happening up ahead?
I think it goes back to my answer before. As long as we're covering, as long as an industry and the insurers, we're covering all our bases to give them the best chance to get their product, that for me would make them in a good position. If we get to a situation where it's so consolidated that actually you've only got 3 reinsurers covering, 4 insurers or probably 2, that's split up, and you don't have other philosophies in there to kind of pick up that stuff, then it's going to disadvantage the consumer. So realistically, if you've got your best clients' intents at heart and you're going to go and put the best policy in place for them, it really doesn't matter if there's 4 or 11 if you're facilitating the need in the best possible way you can. And that's why it's a people business, not a computer business. That's mine.
And I think you probably find that some advisors are already voting with their feet, because when you are attempting to give advice and you are with a client and you're saying, right, I can go with X provider, they're going to take you through underwriting, they've already said it's going to be a GP's report, I've begged and borrowed and nothing will shift them, timescales are currently this, or I can place you here for X amount more, but you will be insured from today. It's informed choice, I think, at the end of the day, because our job as advisors is to educate the clients to understand the journey they're on, the end product they end up with, and the reasons why they have it. As I've explained with my client proposition brochure, I have a specifically chosen panel that I work with. You are more than welcome to go elsewhere if you would like all of them. And they said, no, I want you, because it is that personal connection, it's that spark. And I'm just stealing everybody else's material from today, by the way. Thank you very much for doing a great job. But I do think moving forward, technology is a key part to how we move forward and whether this question is answered in one way or another. Because how many insurers is enough? Well, as long as the needs are being met, as Wes said, as long as the service is there, it's as many as the market can handle and the advisors need. But if we start seeing pockets and holes opening up of service or a massive product gap, or a specific set of clients with a medical need that aren't being met, then at that point, that hole has to be filled. Now, whether that's by somebody existing or whether that's by somebody new, as long as it's yielding a positive result and change, I think that's what needs to be the focus, because we just need to be inclusive and covering as many people as we can.
So, final question.
Hi, James Barclay. My question is, are we sufficiently focused on lead generation to grow the pie, or are we entirely focused on defending what we have?
I mean, within Openwork, we are very much championing this holistic financial advice and making sure that everybody is looked after in every way possible, and that's why we are a full service network. And I think that needs to go across the whole industry, because there are some fantastic wealth advisors out there that talk protection very, very well, but there are also a number out there who choose, and it is a choice, they choose not to. So we need to find the way to engage with them, whether that is bringing their technology in to make processes simpler and easier for them to engage with and integrate into their existing process in terms of the financial planning, or whether it's just educating them in a way around the products that makes them feel more comfortable to talk about it, because it's a very feelings-based conversation when you're talking about protection. Tears go into eyes, we all well up, we all get a bit emotional. And not everybody wants to do that. So it is write it, refer it, and it's using all these lovely phrases that we've built up over the years, but really meaning it, I think.
So I will thank my panellists, all my speakers today. We will be ringing a bell in an hour's time, about 2 to welcome you back for session 3.